Good evening. My name is Dee Marshall, and if you want to say, I was a military brat. I've lived in the Midwest, Southwest, and in Virginia and Hampton. I think this is stuck the wrong way. But anyway, this is what I call the authentic Green Book experience. And it's traveling south in the late 1960s with my family. And as a kid, we took family vacations every summer. And there are a couple that I really remember. And in particular was during the '68 riots. We had gone to Detroit. And coming back, we were really caught in the midst of the riots. And the second one I remember, we were traveling to Little Rock. My mother was from Louisiana, and so we were traveling to visit some more family that lived in Little Rock, Arkansas. And as a kid, of course, I had storytellers. My grandmother, who I listened to, and my mother was a storyteller, and my great-grandmother. So I'm full of stories from those women. And my grandfather, who also told me the stories of how he, and I believed this when I was a kid, he told me he rode a white horse from Shreveport, Louisiana to Dallas, Texas. And I believed that when I was a little girl, that my grandfather was on this white horse and he rode it all the way from Louisiana to Dallas. Then as I got older, I was like, God, he couldn't have done that. But I believed it because my grandfather was such a convincing storyteller. But anyway, the story goes, as a kid, we took a family vacation every year, visiting family in Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana. I was a military brat, as I stated early. I was born on Patuxent River Navy Base in Maryland. I always look forward to these family vacations and look forward to stopping at the different places. I thought that we didn't stop at hotels because we wanted to be together, and that it was just a big, and with my grandmother and my mom, my grandmother was the great Green Book navigator. I never knew what she was looking at. And why did she always know all the roads to take, which highway, they call them highways, expressways, whatever. She always knew which one to take. She was like a genius. I'm like, how can this lady who can't drive know all of these roads, what interstate to take, where to stop? She was the true, I call her the Green Book navigator now that I know what she was always doing with this map and this book. She was always looking. No, you got to go this way. But yet my grandfather and my father, they were the drivers because women were not allowed to drive on the highways or the expressways. And that's why I can drive, because I had to watch my mother and my grandmother sit in the back seat of cars while the men always drove. So as we look forward to our family vacations, and I could never figure out why we did not stop at the hotels or stay overnight. Why did we have to leave late at night and arrive early in the morning? And then they would stop, and I would always hear my grandfather's, oh yeah, we left at midnight. We were there at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, they seem so proud of that. But the theory was to get through the little small towns without being stopped by police. And so on one particular trip, my grandmother, as I stated, was the Green Book navigator. She knew the highways, the interstates. So my dad and grandfather would switch up as drivers. Then we would stop at a rest stop for the picnic. They packed pound cake, and I love, to this day, I love cold chicken. Chicken, they would always have sodas. They would have potato salad, everything was packed. And they get out, they put everything on a picnic table, the tablecloth, and I was like, this is just so wonderful. And I didn't truly understand why we didn't go in the restaurants and buy stuff. We always had plenty of food. They had the vegetables, they had fruits, everything we needed to eat. So I never thought we were not welcome. I just thought we were having good family time and just traveling and wanting to be together. We always had a new car every 3 years. It was always, first it was a Buick, and then they stopped My parents never bought Fords because they said Fords were fix or repair daily and that old man Ford was a bigot. I didn't understand why. And so he was no good, so they didn't buy those. So they would stick with Chevrolets, the Buicks, and then Chevrolets. So first we would stop, we would eat, and I was like, this is so much fun. And then I remember one time we were near Texarkana, Texas, and Texarkana, Arkansas. So we needed to use the restroom. And my grandmother pulled out something, and she found some spot, but it was closed. So we continued, and finally it was like everyone had to go. So we found this little rest stop, and the man, my grandfather and my father went in, and the guy said, no, we couldn't use the restroom there. And we're in the car, and the women are looking. So my grandfather said, just wait, we'll wait a while. So my grandfather, there was a car that pulled up, a truck that pulled up, and it had New Jersey license plates. And so my grandfather talked to the guy, and he said he gave him, my grandmother was in the car saying, he gave him the sign. And I'm guessing, what sign? What is he talking about? Oh, he gave him the sign. So the white guy goes in, the truck driver, and asks if we could use the restroom. And he said, only if you escort them to the restroom. And so he escorted us to the restroom. We waited, like he waited on the outside while we went in. We couldn't do anything else, just the restroom. And then my grandmother pulled out her green book and the map and says, well, when we get to past Texarkana and get into Texarkana, first you get to Texarkana, Arkansas, and then there's Texarkana, Texas, then there's more places that we can stop, refuel, and get gas. So my grandmother, they were very jubilant. They were like, oh, he gave him the sign. And I'm like, what sign is he talking about? What sign? Well, he was a Mason, and my grandfather was a Mason. So that's how he was able, and that's why he waited. He was waiting for a northern or a Midwestern license plate to appear at the truck stop so that we would be able to get some type of assistance without being troublemakers. So when we went to the restroom, the truck driver, he didn't shake my grandfather's hand. I guess they gave a sign again. And then he sort of escorted us a little ways down the roads just in case they did not think that my grandparents and my grandfather were being uppity people. So as a result of that, I said my grandmother, she had to read in the car. She was renegotiating her green book and her map travels, but it always fascinated me that she knew every highway and every road. She was a navigator, the men drove. That's why I said when I grew up, I'm gonna know how to drive a car cross country, any place I wanna go, because I would always watch my grandmother. My mom couldn't drive. I mean, my mom could drive, but she wasn't a strong driver. My great-grandmother never drove. They were the type of women that waited. But that was my true Green Book experience, and that's why a lot of people were upset because they thought the movie Green Book was whitewashed. And because Don Shirley and Tony Lip, his nickname, they were actually, they did drive together for a year and a half. And Don Shirley did give him the okay to publish or to write his story only after he died. But his son kind of sort of whitewashed it a little, but they actually were together a year and a half driving south. But that's my version of the Green Book. And we always had to stop at different places, different family houses. We would get there and we'd stop maybe in Louisiana, then we go to Arkansas, and then we go to Texas. It was always different places, and it was a beautiful networking system. And I never thought they were actually sheltering us from racism. And we had everything we needed, popsicles, ice cream, so that we would not have to stop. Napkins, and sometimes they even, my grandfather and my father, they had to stop and do a restroom break in a wooded area someplace. We never did. I was just like, I'm not, because I always, and then especially if any of you've had any experience in the South, I had an aunt that actually had outhouse, and then in her big farmhouse, she had these pots, these porcelain pots. And I used to think that if you went to that outside thing, my mother would get the biggest kick out of that, because we were too sophisticated. And we would go out there and I'd plug my nose up, and then there was two sides. I just remember I could still see those two holes, and I'd say to my mom, I can't do this. And then my mom would just laugh, because I thought snakes were gonna come up and I thought the snakes were gonna come up and bite me. And then at night, my aunt, she was a real farmer, she and my uncle. They had the cows, they had the barn, and she had the stove where you had to put the wood and put that down. And she would cook, everything was fresh from a farm, but I hated their restroom. And then at night, they had the stinky pot. I call it a stinky pot. I said, I'm not gonna, and I would be so sick by the time I got back home from traveling. But the Green Book experience really made us very much aware of what was going on. My grandmother kept that book like it was an S&H green stamp book. And it just truly amazed and mesmerized me. I was like, how does she remember all these highways? That's 95, then you gotta hook this and go there. She was like a navigator system there. But she was a very smart woman, and a lot of women, they empowered our African American men by being in the back seat, or when I say back seat, not just like I saw an episode of what is it with Tracy Lee Ross, Blackish, and they told a story, and I can also relate with that the men were always able to, they would prepare their plates, and they prepared their plates because they said when their men went out in the world, they were so mistreated. So when they were in the home, they wanted them to feel like a king. So when my grandmother, when she was the navigator, she would always say, well, I think, we've got to go this way. It was never in a emasculating way, but it was like, I think we need to take this highway. No, we need to go this way. But they were the navigators. They couldn't drive, but they knew how to get from point A to point B. So that was my authentic Green Book experience.